Welcome to the Drum Shuffle, a podcast offering insights, perspectives, and conversations for drummers. I'm your host, Jamie Eads. Hey everybody, welcome to the Drum Shuffle. Jamie Eads joining you as always. This is episode 40. We have a fantastic interview for everybody today. We are going to be joined by one of the most instantly recognizable drummers by his playing, in my humble opinion. The jazz great Bill Stewart will be stopping by, taking some time out of his world tour with John Scofield. So please stay tuned after this message from Los Cabos Drumsticks. The best kept secret for drummers is finally out. Los Cabos Drumsticks may look like the sticks you grew up with, but these are not your father's drumsticks. Los Cabos Drumsticks is Canada's #1 drumstick brand, and they are coming to a retailer near you. Los Cabos works hard to ensure they leave the world a better place than how they found it. In addition to their work with the FSC, which helps to prevent deforestation and manage environmental risks, Los Cabos Drumsticks also partners with many local and international nonprofit organizations, including Breast Cancer Can Stick It Foundation and the Canadian Cancer Society. To get involved, look for a Los Cabos pink-dipped drumstick at your local music instrument retailer. With 3 different models to choose from and a portion of all proceeds going to support cancer research to find a cure, you might just find your new favorite drumstick. To learn more about Los Cabos Drumsticks, visit them online at loscabosdrumsticks.com. Follow them on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, and don't forget to ask for Los Cabos Drumsticks at your favorite retailer. Dare to be different. Join the Red Hickory Revolution with Los Cabos Drumsticks. All right, guys and girls, as I mentioned before, we're going to be joined by just a wonderful jazz drummer, Bill Stewart. Again, just instantly recognizable when you hear Bill playing the drums. Very melodic player. He has just done so much great work over the years, literally hundreds of albums. And Bill took some time out of his world tour with John Scofield to come on the show. We talked to him from his hotel in Seattle right before a gig. And I do want to mention that his new solo record is out called Band Menu, just came out last week. Please go give that a listen and check it out. It is just a fantastic record that everybody should have in their collection. So please help me welcome to the Drum Shuffle, Bill Stewart. Hey, good evening, Bill. How you doing?
I'm good, Jamie. Thank you. Thanks for having me on the show.
Oh, well, thank you so much for taking the time. We certainly appreciate it. I know that you are in the midst of a run with the great John Scofield. How are the shows going thus far?
They're going really well. It's a really nice band. Gerald Clayton is playing piano, and Vicente Archer is playing bass. And of course, I've worked with John in many different projects, but this is a fairly recent one, and there's a new record out of John that we're promoting as well, or that he's promoting, it's been really fun. So we're doing our U.S. portion now. Basically, I'm on the road for pretty much 7 weeks straight. So it's about 3 weeks in the States and then about 4 weeks in Europe. And between the States and Europe, I get to go back to New York for about, 23 hours and do my laundry and stuff like that, and then go straight to Europe. So, but we're in Seattle at the moment, at Jazz Alley, and having nice shows there. And we're going to go on to California and do some shows there coming up, and Portland and Phoenix. And so yeah, I'm having a nice time.
Good. Yeah. Well, they said, become a professional musician, tour the world. It'll be fun, they said. And then you get...
Sometimes it's not, I can tell you. But As tours go, this one's going smoothly and well, and like these 4 nights. We're doing 4 nights in Seattle, so I don't have to travel on those days. So that really helps not to have to travel every single day. But once we get to Europe, it's going to be kind of like that.
Yeah, for sure.
A lot of 4 a.m. departures and stuff that just kind of beats you down a little bit. So it's not all fun and games, but the music's really fun, and overall, I have to say, I feel fortunate to be able to do it,
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think I speak for our entire crowd. All of our drummers that listen, week in and week out would gladly trade places with you and do a tour with John Scofield if you would allow them, I'm sure.
Sure. I'll take their job, whatever it is.
There you go. Well, Bill, I think one of the things that I definitely want to touch on, and I know you've done a ton of these types of interviews, and I don't want to bore you, certainly, but you grew up in Des Moines, Iowa, in the 70s. And, dare I say that probably wasn't a hotbed for the jazz scene at that time. I know that you come from a very musical family, but if you don't mind, talk a little bit about your upbringing in Iowa, because I know you're kind of a self-taught guy, and took some lessons from your dad, who was a great trombone player. But if you could just kind of touch on some of those things for our audience, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. Well, I didn't exactly take lessons from my dad, but he was a band director and an excellent, really great trombonist. Really, he played jazz, and he had his own sound on his instrument, and he was sort of a local, I don't know if you'd say legend, but he was very respected, and as was my mother, who's a choir director, very, very respected choir director. And so I grew up with a lot of music, and actually, Des Moines is not a hotbed for jazz, you're right, especially in terms of like bands coming through. We didn't get much live music coming close, other than a few different things would come through, like big bands sometimes, Woody Herman, Maynard Ferguson, maybe Count Basie, stuff like that. When I was growing up, which would have been, in the 70s mostly. And, I started out, I guess, being very interested in music just because I was around it. And when I must have been about 5 or 6, my Uncle Scott and his family got me a toy set of drums, which was paper mache, I think they were made out of. And so I got... I basically broke those in a day or two. They weren't very sturdy, and but I think my parents made a note that I enjoyed playing those. So my dad actually brought some spare drum equipment home from his teaching gig at the junior high school on weekends and such, and I'd start playing these drums. And at first I had a big bass drum and a little crack cymbal and a snare drum and one mounted tom. And I think some of the drums had calf heads even. But so that's what I started playing with, and just playing with records around the house. And my dad did show me things like how to hold the sticks and this sort of thing, but it's not really like I had lessons with him, like we scheduled a lesson or something. But, he was around, and he'd hear me playing and say, "Hey, you're rushing," or something like that, So I'm sure that was helpful. And I just sort of went from there. I played a lot with records at home, and went to my dad's gigs and my mom's concerts, and so I got really into music.
Yeah, and I guess I'm curious. Your dad, of course, was a jazz guy, but was it always jazz music for you, or were you like most kids and did the rock and roll thing as well in concert? Pardon the pun, with the jazz studies.
Mm-hmm. No, rock and roll is pretty much missing from my childhood, actually, because what I was into somewhat was singers and some like R&B music, like Rita Franklin we had, and Ray Charles, and we had a Stevie Wonder record, and so I got into that side of things too, and it seemed a little more connected to jazz to me. But I didn't grow up with Rush records like a lot of people my age or something,
Sure.
So I really didn't know that much rock music. I knew a little bit because it was around. You heard it everywhere. And also in Iowa, you heard, especially if you got outside of Des Moines, you really heard a lot of country music. That was mainly what you heard. So that was around too. But my parents' record collection was mostly jazz, singers, classical, a little blues, R&B, not so much rock music. They didn't. I don't think they didn't have a Beatles record, for instance.
Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, that's a fair answer, and I think so many guys of our vintage. You're just a little bit older than I am, but so many guys of our vintage, it's always the Beatles, the Stones. You hear that time and time again, and it's not. Yeah, I started with jazz and I stayed with jazz. I think that's the more unique answer to that question, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
So growing up in Iowa, I know that you started your college years at the University of North Iowa, correct?
University of Northern Iowa, that's correct.
Okay. Now, when you got there, were you a music major, I guess, is what I'm getting at? Was music kind of the driving force once you started your collegiate life?
I was a music major. There was no jazz major. I think I was a music major and not a music education major, which a lot of people were there. So I spent 1 year there before I transferred out east to William Patterson College, which is where I did the rest of my stay in college. But the first year was at UNI.
Okay. Now, when you got to William Patterson, I think it's well documented that you studied very hard there. Did you immediately just kind of plant roots after college in New York, or did you travel around a bit before you really joined that scene?
No, I think I planted the roots on the East Coast even before I moved to Brooklyn, which was in the spring of '89, and that was about a year after I graduated college. But so toward the end of my stay at William Patterson College, I was starting to work just a little bit. It really helped when I got a car. Actually, a couple years into my stay there, I got a car, and then I was able to actually do gigs.
Sure.
So because you needed to bring your drums to some gig somewhere, especially in those days. Nowadays, it seems a lot of venues have drum sets, or it's more common. But in the late '80s, it wasn't very common. Had to pull up with your drums and load them and take them home and pack them up. All that stuff. So, but I was starting to work some on the East Coast and in New York City in the very late '80s, '88. Yeah, from probably late '87 on.
I think this, segues beautifully into my next question, which is, when you start working in New York as a jazz drummer, there's 1,000,000,007 great jazz drummers in New York City. I mean, I think that's a fair assessment. There's a load of talent there.
Yeah.
I would love for you to talk a little bit about how you started getting some attention. And I know that there were probably 2 or 3 very seminal moments in your career that led to really big breaks. Walk us through that if you don't mind.
Sure. I think I first, a lot of my connections were made, my early connections were made when I was at William Patterson College. With the students, some of the better students there who went on to work and might recommend me for something, for instance, and also with the faculty, some of the teachers there recommended me for gigs, or I would end up on gigs with a few of those people. So that was really a start. And in the early days, I was also doing things like going to after-hours jam sessions and waiting around all night till 3:30 to get to play, and all the stuff that people do when they're new in New York just to get known. And so, sometimes I'd wait all night and not get to play. There
Sure.
was that too. But I did my best to, get out there. And I went to a lot of gigs and, heard other people's gigs. And, now and then I get to meet someone, or someone I knew would introduce me to someone else. And the New York thing is really, I think, probably still to this day, it's a gradual word of mouth thing, and sometimes it's not that gradual. If somebody comes to town and they're really dealing, then word spreads actually pretty fast. So it's a lot of it is word of mouth from musicians talking about other musicians. Hey, I heard this guy, or I played a session with this guy, or this, whatever. So it sort of works like that, I think, and that's how it was for me.
Absolutely. Well, I think one of the comments that I hear most often about your playing is that you're a very melodic drummer. And I know where that's coming from. Your work as a leader, and I am not a jazz guy. I will tell you that straight up. I love jazz music, but I cannot play jazz music to save my life. It's just
Fair
not,
enough.
It's just not a skill set that I'm equipped with.
A lot of kinds of music I can't play either, so.
Right. I mean, I just, I'm more comfortable in a, steady backbeat, whether it be country, rock, pop, whatever the case may be. But I understand what people mean when they say, Bill Stewart is a very melodic drummer. And dare I say, there is, your work as a leader has a touch of avant-garde to it as well. Where does that come from? Is that something that you picked up from your early influences, or is it just how the music comes out of your body?
Which part? The touch of avant-garde, you mean?
Yeah, exactly. And just your sense of melody from a percussive instrument.
Well, a lot of the music I play is interactive, which means that to me, it means that my part in the music is changing a lot, and also spontaneously changing. I play in a lot of situations where I'm improvising, and it has a groove, but it's in terms of what I play, I can change it. It's different every night, and different interactions every night. And so that's different than playing music with a repetitive backbeat. Because when you're playing a repetitive backbeat, it's hard to create melody, for instance. You're playing that beat. And I've played gigs like that too, where I needed to, play the same thing over and over again, maybe with a little embellishment or such. But due to the, I guess, interactive nature of the music, that allows me to, play melodies. Like when I'm playing the ride cymbal, I can play things on the toms, the snare, hi-hat, and so that gives a sense of a melodic counterpoint to whatever else is going on in the music, with a lot of the things that I tend to do, including what I'm doing, for instance, this week with John Scofield here in Seattle. So,
absolutely. The other thing that I think is apparently obvious, with your playing style, is the fact that you're one of the few jazz great drummers that plays match grip. Now, is that something that you've done your entire life, or is it just more comfortable for you? And did any of your instructors along the way, your teachers that you had, whether in high school or college, did anybody try to switch you back to traditional grip?
The answer to that last question is no, and it might be a little surprising, but no, nobody ever did. I think, when I first started playing drums, it was acceptable by that point to teach beginning students matched grip instead of traditional. And maybe 20 years earlier in history, that wouldn't have been so likely, but it was actually, being thought of as being the match grip would be easier for beginning students, which in fact it probably is. So I started with that and just kept going with it, basically. And nobody along the way said, "Hey, you shouldn't do that." But I did notice that most jazz drummers played the other grip at least some of the time. But I was able to make do with the match grip. And it was, I gradually learned that they really do sound different, and they, so I can play a little bit of a traditional grip. I know how to hold the stick more or less, and so if I switch to it, I hear this difference in sound immediately. I mean, it's, I know what that is. And because of that, I can do some things with match grip that sort of approximate the sound of traditional grip. I think one of the things is the angle of the stick, or the varying angle that tends to be created with traditional grip. I think that the stick tends to be higher off the drum with traditional grip than match grip, and I think that's one of the things that makes it sound different. Maybe the main thing. There was a time, when I was at William Patterson College, I think it was my last year or so, I asked my teacher, Horace Arnold, to help me learn traditional grip. So he showed me some things in terms of just holding the stick, and said, well, this player plays it like this, and this player is more like this, like little different variations on traditional grip that you might see. So I learned a little bit about it that way and started practicing it some, but I never really got good at it so I could really use it on gigs. So I never did. And then I think there was a point later after I'd already, after my career had really, had started, where I started, trying to learn traditional grip as well, but certain things I could never do very well. Like I could never play a press roll well with it, for instance. So I think I've just stuck with the traditional grip the match grip for better or worse. That's what I use.
Well, I mean, it certainly works for you. I don't think, anybody could say, oh, well, I can listen to one of Bill's records and tell that, he's playing match grip versus traditional. I mean, it all sounds like great jazz music to me, so. Okay. Well. So, I don't know. I guess some people could. It's just, it seems like in the jazz world, anything that's, I don't know what I'm trying to say here, but if it's breaking the mold, there's a lot of resistance to it until it completely shatters the mold, if you will, and there's been a lot of guys that have completely shattered the mold over the years. Tony Williams comes to mind. So I just found that really interesting. And, I've watched videos of your playing, and even your matched grip is very sensitive as compared to other guys that play matched grip, to my eyes anyway. And it's really amazing to me, some of the sounds that you can get, that I cannot, and we're playing the exact same grip with our left hand. It's pretty amazing. So kudos to you for developing that over these years,
Thank you. There are a few examples I could point out of like jazz drummers who played matched grip. Well, nowadays, Jack DeJohnette in the last, 15 years at least, has played pretty much mostly all match grip, and before that he played traditional. But also Max Roach in later years played almost all match grip. I heard him Tower Records in New York, and he played all match grip in later years. An older drummer that played match grip was Cozy Cole.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's cool.
A couple videos of him. One that was in, a little later that was color, and then I saw one that was black and white, and in both he was playing match script. So it's not totally unprecedented. Also, players like Tony Williams, Art Blakey, Roy Haynes, they would play match script some of the time. In fact, I saw I recently saw an Art Blakey video where it seemed like he was playing match script about getting close to half the time, so it's not totally unprecedented, but it still seems that most jazz drummers play traditional, at least some of the time.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I didn't know that about Cozy, but that's cool. That's good information. We all learned something today. Bill, who are some of your big influences, both, growing up as a young drummer, and how about, give us some of your favorite contemporaries today?
Sure. I started out listening to a lot of records. So I would listen to the records, but I would also read the record jackets, and read who's the drummer and who's the bass player, and so I would memorize a lot of that information. But so I got to know different players. One of the first records I had, I think it might have been the first jazz record I had that was my own record, like I owned the record, it had my name on it, was Quincy Jones' Walking in Space, and that had two drummers, Grady Tate and Bernard Purdy, on it, and I became fans of both of those guys and listened to stuff they did, and they were on a lot of records in those days, which would have been in the mid-'70s. And this is in addition to hearing maybe a few local people. There's a drummer, a very good friend of my family's, named Jim Eckloff, who I heard play with my dad, for instance. He was someone I heard early on, and probably, he was definitely the person I heard most in Des Moines play. And then everything else after that was more like just listening to records, adding, discovering new people that I didn't know. And so, from Bernard Purdy and Grady Tate, I, got into Jack DeJohnette, and I got into, different people, Idris Muhammad, and different people that I heard. And not too long after that, I was into, Tony Williams and different things, Roy Haynes, Philly Joe Jones, Elvin Jones, and all sorts of people like that. And I could probably sit here and name 40 more drummers that I feel influenced by in some maybe small way, but I don't know if we have time for all of that. But there's just so many different people I've listened to and gotten maybe a little something from, and so I'm a music fan, as well as just a musician as well. So
absolutely.
Like that.
Well, I think, and this has been discussed on my show anyway, just time and time again, there is never a drummer that I see play live or listen to one of their recordings that I don't steal something, just some little thing. It can be something very, very minute, and incorporate it into my own playing, or at least try to, as I practice, etc. And what's really cool about drummers, and I've said this a million times, is we always give credit. I can say, hey, I ripped this lick off of, I don't know, Mitch Mitchell, and I give credit there. And we kind of poke fun at guitarists on the drum shuffle. Guitarists will say, oh, no, I invented that note. So
Right.
But, I mean, I think drummers, we all have just this huge potpourri of influences that we pull from. And even though I'm self-admittedly not a jazz player, there are things that I certainly picked up from guys like Art Blakey and Joe Morello, and just watching them play that I'd never thought of doing that, which is what's really cool about us drummers, I think, anyway.
Yeah, and then I think, your experience, the different things that you hear, that's part of what makes, you sound more like you, too. Your, unique set of experiences.
Yeah, without a doubt. Who are some of your favorite drummers today, your contemporaries? Who are you listening to that you say, wow, that's really good stuff?
Let's see, of my contemporaries, there's so many great players now. People that aren't so far from my age, I would say, like Brian Blade and Jeff Ballard, and probably forget somebody really important, Greg Hutchinson. There's a lot of younger players that are really good too, like Marcus Gilmore and Kendrick Scott and different people. Trying to think who else. All sorts of different people who do all different things. Tyshawn Sorey is another interesting musician, writes music, plays great drums. Dan Weiss is doing interesting things, like some of his solo records with the Independents are amazing. There's also all sorts of people doing interesting things. I don't know if I could think of all of them off the top of my head.
Well,
that's a start.
Yeah, absolutely. And, certainly not trying to put you on the spot at all. I was just hoping maybe you would turn me on to some new stuff to listen to. So I had an ulterior motive there. There is just so much, wonderful music out there. And I think it's, a good news, bad news sort of scenario. The good news is anybody can make a record today. The bad news is anybody can make a record today. I'm just overwhelmed by the choices that are out there, quite honestly. And sometimes you miss the next great thing just because it's it's one tiny drop of water in a sea of music that comes out each week.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, everybody's more or less in the not the same boat exactly, but yeah, it's everybody has their CD is their business card now. So if it's even a CD, so it might be a download card or whatever it is.
Right. Well, I tend to be a physical media sort of guy, says the podcast host, right? But I don't feel like I own music until I have it on, some sort of physical format, whether it be a compact disc or, I've gotten back into vinyl. And, you and I grew up in a very similar situation in that I have to read the liner notes. I just feel like it's not the process of listening to music isn't complete until you've read, who produced it, where was it recorded, and I just geek out on that stuff. I love knowing that information. Well,
yeah, I think I miss not having that information on, say, iTunes. I miss that as well because I want to know those things too. I want to know who wrote the tune and who's the bass player and that kind of thing.
Absolutely. Well, and you've mentioned, writing a couple of times. So I do want to at least pick your brain, if I may. I know that you're also a good piano player, and that's how you compose a lot of the stuff that you do as a band leader. Is that something that you picked up as a child as well, or is that something that came later in life?
I think I almost threw it away as a child because I had piano lessons when I was maybe 4th, 5th grade in that area, and I might have had it for a couple of years, some piano lessons, and I didn't practice enough. I didn't practice regularly, so I didn't get very good, and I didn't really have the discipline or I didn't have the discipline to deal with it at that time, or just the love of doing it, and it was, they were classical piano lessons for the most part, and, playing things out of, a book of tunes, for, young students or something, and I just didn't get that into it. So I dropped it, and, but then when I was in college, I became interested in writing music. So, and I was interested in the bigger picture of music, not just the drums. So that's when I started playing piano just to compose. And actually, when I was at William Patterson College, I did have some piano lessons with Jim McNeely, who's a very well-known jazz pianist and arranger. And also composition lessons with Dave Samuels, who's a very well-known vibraphonist. So in addition to like theory classes and ear training, and actually at University of Northern Iowa, I took a composition class that was sort of open-ended but geared toward introducing musicians to like modern sounds, like 20th century classical music. So I studied some of that, and then when I was at William Patterson College, I studied theory, analyzed Brahms and Stravinsky and different things. So I got into piano playing at home, especially once I had a piano in where I lived. I could, sit and play, and so that's what I do still now. I play the piano more than the drums at home, but I don't perform really. I don't play for anyone's enjoyment, but I use it a lot to write, and I like to just play too. Just sometimes I'll play songs out of a fake book or something. I can sit and play a song more or less in time, but not that I would recommend it to anyone, but hearing it anyway. but I really enjoy it, and it's different than playing the drums. It's quieter, for instance. So I like to play it late at night. I have a piano that has a practice pedal, where the middle pedal makes the piano softer, so late at night I can play some chords and this sort of thing, and I enjoy doing that. So
sure, you can keep your jazz musician hours and not wake the family, which is which they all appreciate. Well, I've asked this question of other guests that are multi-instrumentalists, and Brandon Goodwin comes to mind immediately. He composes. He's a great jazz drummer, but he composes most of his band's, works on piano. And I ask him, and I'm curious how you would answer this. When you sit down to write a composition that you're going to be performing as a drummer, do you always write and compose the music thinking of it from the drummer's perspective, or are you thinking of it from a pianist perspective and then, come up with your drum parts after the fact?
It's more that in most cases, I come up with the drum parts to my music after the fact. Yes.
Okay.
So when I write the music, it's like I'm writing a tune, I'm writing a song, I'm writing some kind of a structure, and I might have in mind sort of how I'm going to play it on the drums, but actually I find that once I write the music and then I rehearse it, then I need a little time to figure out what my part is. And for instance, I recently recorded a CD of my own, and there weren't any, I wrote 5 new tunes, and there weren't gigs in advance of recording it. There were gigs after I recorded it, and that's when I discovered that I wished I'd had some gigs before, because when I recorded it, I hadn't quite come up with the drum part that I would like. On at least one thing, there's a little passage in a certain section where I realized I should have played it differently to let the other parts of the music come through better. So when I actually rehearse the music with a band, it's almost like someone else is handing me a lead sheet, but
Yeah.
it's almost like I'm a drummer in someone's band at that point. So that's when I have to work it out on the drum set in terms of orchestration.
Sure. Well, I mean, I just think it's a different perspective. Someone like me who's a drummer through and through. I mean, I can't sit down and write a song on another instrument. I can play a few chords on a guitar or whatever. I just feel like if I were sitting down to write a composition, I don't know that I could get out of the headspace of being a drummer long enough to write a truly realized piece of music. As a pianist or as a guitarist, I would be thinking about, okay, what kind of fill am I going to do going into the middle eight? I just think that's how my brain would work. So it's really interesting to me to hear you guys that play other instruments, how you compose and think about it, and saying, it's like being handed a lead sheet and I'm the drummer in somebody's band at that point. That's just, it's amazing to me. It's a cool way of approaching it, certainly. Do you get, I guess, a bigger kick out of composing music and recording your own things as a leader, or are you equally happy, like on your tour right now, being just the drummer in John's band?
Well, I like both things. I mean, there's something nice about hearing your music played, certainly. I mean, if it sounds good to you. If it's not sounding good, maybe it's not so nice. But, something that you've worked at and some, piece of music that you've created, it's nice to hear that, I will say. And I've mostly played with, as a sideman with bands more than I've been a leader. So it's a nice treat. But there's something nice about playing other people's music too. I mean, it brings out something different in my playing, depending on who I'm playing with, really, whose music it is. So I guess I like all of the above, really, if it's good music, if it's music that I'm into. So I'm happy playing John's tunes, and I'm happy to do mine tunes when I get a chance. So it's kind of like that.
Sure, absolutely. So, Bill, I mean, obviously, you've had just a remarkable career. You've been doing this for quite some time. What is on the horizon for Bill Stewart? What is left for you to conquer, if anything?
Conquer, I like that. I like that word. Well, I don't look too incredibly far ahead normally, but I do have a new record out that's coming out October 19th. Is the official release date, and it's a trio record with Walter Smith and Larry Grenadier. We just about a month ago we did a week at the Village Vanguard, which is probably the world's most famous jazz club. So I did 6 nights and 12 sets with those guys there. And previous to that, in I guess it was late February, we recorded this new recording. So I'm excited about that, and maybe at some point we can do some touring with that group as well. And we are going to do another engagement at the Village Vanguard, but that won't be till the year 2020. And in the meantime, the next year or so is pretty set for me in terms of touring. I've got quite a bit of work with John Scofield, and also some work with the trio that I have been with for a long time, with Larry Goldings and Peter Bernstein.
Oh, wow. Okay.
which is a co-led trio at this point, and so we do some work in the States and Europe now and then when we can. So there's going to be both some work in the States and Europe coming up with that band in the next year or so, and even more stuff with Scofield over the next 9 months or so. So the immediate future is that a lot of gigs, a lot of touring, and beyond that, I just I want to keep writing some music and keep trying to play better if I can. But as far as what there is to conquer, I don't know. Maybe I'll do more as a leader as I get older. We'll see. It's not always. I mean, it's much easier actually for me to be a sideman because in that case, mostly I show up and play the drums. That there's something nice and easy about that. Whereas when you're a band leader, you've got for each gig you're a band leader as opposed to being a sideman. At least for me, there's 20 times the things to think about.
Sure.
If I'm doing a gig as a leader, it's really that much, especially if I'm doing my own tunes and this kind of thing. There's just there's a lot more to think about going into each gig, and so but I like doing it, so I'm going to keep doing some of my own things.
Absolutely. Now, your record that's going to be released here in the next week or so, I'm assuming that's going to be available everywhere fine music can be found, correct?
It's going to be available. It's going to be available on iTunes. It's going to be available at cdbaby.com, in both, I think, digital and physical form. I guess if you want a physical CD, cdbaby.com might be the best bet. I think it may be physical CD on Amazon as well, and also digital, and it will be on Spotify and Sound Exchange, and that is it, I think.
Okay, well, we will certainly look forward to that. Bill, I want to be respectful of your time because I know that you do have a gig here in just a few minutes, so thank you for coming on. But one of the traditions that we have here on the Drum Shuffle, we always ask our guests for a good piece of advice for other musicians and other drummers. Share with us a good piece of advice that we can take out into our day-to-day lives.
I would say just, listen to keep your ears open for things that are interesting to you as a musician. What we talked about earlier in terms of, hearing, all these different things, and you keep a memory bank of what you hear and what you're interested in, and that's sort of what shapes you as a musician in many ways, is what you like and what your unique combination of listening experiences and life experiences, and these things kind of help you, help bring some individuality to the music, I think. So I guess keep listening for things that you like and keep working on your music. I guess that would be my basic advice.
Well, that's a darn good piece of advice from you. Ladies and gentlemen, Bill Stewart. Bill, thank you so much for joining us here on the Drum Shuffle. We really do appreciate it. I wish you nothing but the best out there on this run with John and all the other things, projects that you have going on out there. We'll be looking for your album here in the next week or so, out there on CD Baby and iTunes, Amazon, etc. You are welcome on this program anytime, Bill. Come back anytime and let us know what you got going on.
Thanks so much, Jamie, and best of luck with all your music and with the, and continuing success with the podcast as well.
Well, I really appreciate that, Bill. I hope you have a great run, a great gig tonight, and we'll talk to you very soon, sir.
Thanks so much, Jamie.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, everybody, that's going to do it for episode 40 of the Drum Shuffle. Many thanks to Bill Stewart for taking some time out of his very busy schedule to come on the show. We have some fantastic guests coming up for you over the next few weeks. So please hit the subscribe button on whatever platform you're using to listen in so you don't miss a single show. Next week, I'm going to be joined by Sandy Gennaro. Of course, Sandy is known for his work with Cyndi Lauper, Joan Jett and the Blackhearts, the Pat Travers Band. He has just done fantastic work over his career, and he has a wonderful life now as a motivational speaker as well. You are not going to want to miss this interview. I promise you that. I do want to thank each and every one of you for tuning in. We simply cannot do it without every single one of you listening week after week, so we really do appreciate it. We love hearing from you throughout the week. Our email address is thedrumshufflepodcast@gmail.com. Our web address is thedrumshuffle.com, and you can find more information about me at jamieeads.com. Again, thank you for listening. We will talk to you next week. So until then, may your head stay strong and your sticks never break. Cheers, everybody.